Good afternoon, good morning, welcome wherever you are. You're joining me here today in a brand new location for Hager, certainly a new location for me. We're in Stamford in Lincolnshire, and boy, have we got a tour for you today. Hopefully the weather will hold reasonably fair, and apart from the fact that it is rather busy with cars, it is, I think, one of the prettiest places I've been able to bring you so far. So kind of sit back, enjoy, soak up the history. And Jennifer Earle plays the best Elizabeth Bennet, and absolutely we're going to be talking about Jane Austen a little bit as we kind of walk around, because of course this was the filming location for Pride and Prejudice, also Middlemarch and one or two others. It's kind of go-to place for that. But we're starting here on Scottgate, so let me give you a shot. Thank you, KCM. We'll just flick that, and we're going to come and talk about this church on the way kind of back down the hill. We'll put All Saints Church right here in the middle of the town. And as I say, we are on what's called Scottgate. And Scottgate is basically, it's the route of the old A1. The old Great North Road ran right the way through Stamford. And the history of Stamford itself, thank you, Pauline, goes all the way kind of back about 1,000 years. And it's linked, of course, to its location, its kind of proximity. I'll just try and get that gimbal to behave itself. There we go. It wasn't a Roman settlement, although Ermine Street, the road from York to Lincoln, passes by very, very near to here. So it's not really until the Viking era that it becomes settled. Thank you, Marion. And so we're talking about really 1,000 years of kind of history. It's in the 9th and 10th century when it becomes one of the 5 controlling boroughs of the Danelaw. So Alex wanted to remind you that he is from Stamford. Which Alex is that? Anyway, Alex, hopefully this is bringing back some lovely memories, and hopefully I do... Oh, what, Alex as in Alex that goes everywhere? Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't know that. Well, hopefully he will feel that I've done it justice tonight. So one of the 5 boroughs of the Danelaw, and the Danelaw, of course, is what emerges from the peace settlement with the Vikings. Alfred the Great has this idea of an England, this nation called England, but he simply hasn't got the strength to make it happen. So he does deal with the Vikings, with Guthrum, the northern king based in York, or Jorvik, and haves off half of England. And so this is one of the main settlements of the Danelaw under Viking control. It becomes very prosperous in the 13th and 14th century due to the wool trade and textiles, very similar to Lavenham, where we were a couple of weeks ago. This English economy, it's always the same stories that I'll keep telling you with different kind of emphasis that kind of relates to the kind of sense of place. But it's the wool trade that really kind of pushes through. That is the economic driver for medieval England. And so this becomes one of the 10 largest towns in medieval England. But the relocation into East Anglia, down to Lavenham, in the 15th and 16th century begins to kind of impoverish this town. And it falls into very, very poor repair. In fact, in 1602, it was virtually bankrupt, and they had to ask for basically relief from paying the taxes, which they got. And they suffered horribly in 1604 with a plague, so it really wasn't going at all well. But then, bit by bit, their fortunes began to turn around. They came out largely kind of unscathed during the English Civil War, the middle part of the 17th century. And from that kind of point onwards, it's an uptick, because what we get is the beginnings of the coaching industry. And because of its location, midway between York and London on the Great North Road, long-distance coach services all stop here. We'll be talking a fair bit about that as we go along. But because it became an incredibly wealthy place, and it was all rebuilt in the 18th and 19th century, this beautiful stone that you're going to get, just sort of immerse yourself in. I want to start up here by 2 hospitals. So the first is Thomas Truesdale's, and then we'll look at Snowdon's as well. And the hospitals are almshouses. They are, about wealthy benefactors using their wealth to demonstrate, if you like, their Christian faith by setting up almshouses. People who kind of fallen on their uppers, people who are struggling financially, were provided with places to live. And so this, I'll show you a photo. I'm not going to go into it but I'll just show you through the arch, the beautiful gardens. The interpretation, Bob doesn't want to take a photograph of that. It was set up in memory of his wife, who died quite early. I think she was 23 when she died, the wife of Thomas Truesdale. But this form of philanthropy was kind of very, very common. And of course, at its heart, it's kind of very, very Christian, to kind of lay down almshouses to provide for people that historically, otherwise, with no sort of social security, no kind of pension benefits and so forth, would have really struggled. Is that okay? Thank you so much. So we're just coming through the archway, but isn't it absolutely beautiful? And I think it really just kind of shows, how our attitudes towards sort of charity have changed in many respects, because we find ourselves these days, so forth, thinking about the deserving, the undeserving poor, and so forth. And the narrative of the past with wealth and with merchants seemed to be a great deal simpler, because it was based on their demonstrations of their Christian spirit, if you like. Charity is a very, very important pillar, isn't it, during of Christian faith? So I think creating accommodation of this kind of quality just kind of underlines, isn't it gorgeous? People obviously still live here. I've just got brief permission there from a lady resident to kind of pop in and show you. But isn't it gorgeous? But of course, this is a measure, if you like, of the wealth of the town. That when it came to laying down these kind of, what do you call them, disbursements, isn't it? The kind of sums of money, if you like, in honour of people. Got some almshouses in Tottenham. They were all over, Leslie. A very, very kind of popular form of philanthropy, particularly religious philanthropy. To basically, because as I say, there was no benefits, there was no pensions, there was no way of looking after older people. So consequently, creating accommodation where they could live out the last few years of their lives when you kind of retired or you're arthritic, could no longer work, whatever it might be, was a kindness, really. So this one, by the way, I know Marlene is on, this one actually worked as a dispensary as well. Susan, there's some almshouses working in York as well. We've got about 8 almshouses in York that take in often single ladies, Christian ladies and so forth. So you can see this was rebuilt in the 1820s. Snowdon's Hospital, rebuilt in 1823. And again, I'm not going to go in and disturb people, but again, you've got a beautiful courtyard, and again, you've got this kind of design and room. So these originally date back to the 17th century. Snowdon, just we've left there, was set up for 8 poor women. It was founded in 1604. Trousdale's about 70 or 80 years later, but aren't they stunning? They're run by trusts, broadly speaking. Joanne's got almshouses in Tamworth in Arden, beautiful town. We ought to get a Hey-Go guide over in that way, it's beautiful. Maybe Ian Braesby could take you to Tamworth in Arden, gorgeous place. But let's go and walk up Barnhill, because I think it's time for us to kind of kick off our Jane Austen fantasy, because this street, I guarantee, is going to live in spades. So as I say, in the 14th and the 15th century, it's going to cross over, it's very busy, by the way, cars. This town had become very derelict. And, in effect, there was no money being generated. So consequently, an awful lot of the buildings just stood empty. But this economic boom that comes, has it already winded? Don't be cynically, but couldn't the Opus also be intended for younger workers? Maybe, Richard. I mean, I had never thought about it that way. But, I suppose it could be. Interesting question. Almost like reverse psychology. It's like, don't bother looking after yourself because there is a safety net. But I think that's what you mean, Richard. But anyway, good question, thank you. So this kind of economic boom that comes from the coaching results in a huge rebuilding. Sorry, this building's not on this side, but as soon as we get around this corner, I promise you, you're going to start to melt. What's interesting, though, is the arrival of the railways in the 19th century. Because this did 2 things. Firstly, it put an end to the coaching business. It did to the canals business. The railways were hugely transformative. And the railways, of course, were about the fastest ways of moving goods and people, weren't they? From economic centre to economic centre. And they had a huge impact on Stamford's fortunes. Now, initially, the Great Northern Railway was planned to follow the route of the Great North Road and would have come through Stamford. But it was opposed by the local landowner, the Marquis of Exeter, And he was maybe scared of the industrialisation, the kind of pace of reform the railway might bring. And so instead, it was routed through Peterborough. They got the main line in August 1844. And so with no mainline links, in effect, there was no industrial revolution here. And so Stamford becomes, if you like, frozen in time. And that's what we're going to see on this tour. Of course, it exists as a modern town, a workplace, but it is the finest stone town in England. Almost every building is absolutely beautiful. And it's because of this, obviously, that it is a favourite of films of period drama. Because it is so easy to kind of rock up and get your cameras out here and film. Because it is so little changed from the 18th and the 19th century. This house here on our left-hand side was once home, or on this site rather, home of William Stukely. And William Stukely, very similar to Bathstone, it is it's called Jurassic limestone. They built up. Am I deliberately walking slow? I suppose so. I'm just trying to get us, take it all in. It's not a huge place. I don't want to kind of jog. So William Stukely is the father of British archaeology. And yeah, normally I run. So there's his antiquary, as they were called in the old days. But William Stukely was the vicar at All Saints Church. Somebody wants to live somewhere like this. Yeah, I think we all do, because what you're going to see, you're looking in every direction, and you've got an integrity of an artistic kind of vision, as you might say. This, as I say, a lot of people will. I thought of this ankle glimpses. So sort of starting from there really onwards. This is called Barn Hill, by the way. Do you know the black iron thing that is hanging from the left side of the front door? The black iron thing that's hanging from the front door? No, I don't. Oh, they look like weights to me. I don't know why they should be up there, but they look like canty weights. These, by the way, are boot scrapers. There's lots of these. So imagine you Mr. Darcy's and you're kind of riding boots and everything. Scraping your boots. Anyway, hello, Elise. Good to see you. And there's a really cool one I'll show you in a minute. But isn't it gorgeous? So basically, as I say, it's incredibly easy to get a film down here because there is so little that kind of needs changing. And what you've kind of got here, obviously, is a cluster. I'm going to talk about this a little bit kind of later on, of people all building in the same style or kind of buying into the same kind of social ideas. And some are delightful and quaint. Maybe it is. Lost signal? I don't think so, not for me. Anybody else lost signal? I think there were hanging basket brackets. Some wonderful porticos. And some, of course, of these houses are especially grand. So isn't it just something? Stephen, have you been to Stamford? No, Stephen's lives in the northwest, so how's that for you, Jane Austen? And your Empire line, all heaving bosoms and everything. Isn't it absolutely beautiful? So Middlemarch was filmed as well here. They've done loads and loads of different sort of period sort of filmings. And so, I just want you to kind of take in, it's called Jurassic limestone. It's all kind of quarried very, very kind of nearby to here. And basically the more money you would have this kind of smooth finished stone. That's more of a kind of rough stone, or called a cobblestone, as you might say, which did have a degree, it became fashionable for kind of brief period, but this sort of fascia, arcle, I can't remember what it's called, of limestone. This is real money. But often they only did this sort of the front, the sides and the back of the building wouldn't be done. The top parts of doors known as keystones, your architraves around them, and again these were, if you like, kind of conspicuous decorative features of the house. But even though they're all of a kind of period, there is a considerable difference, as you can see, in the buildings themselves. So it isn't that we've got uniform style, even though of course they're all from largely the kind of same period. They are kind of highly individual. But isn't it lovely? So even with a blue sky, you can only imagine how beautiful this would look. But nonetheless, even in this weather. Do they have private backyards? I don't know, is the answer. I'm going to say on all of them. The houses are fairly close together and we're about to walk sort of behind them, so I'm guessing probably not. Did they have much sound insulation between the walls back then? Well, obviously stone is a reasonably decent kind of insulator, but it wouldn't have been a major concern because the walls are pretty thick, aren't they? They seem to be a lot thicker than sort of contemporary, so never actually looked like this. Oh, they are, Leslie. So again, look at this beautiful porchway there. Isn't that just gorgeous? Isn't it, Esther? The whole thing, and as I say, you just go from building to building. It's the kind of continuity of the whole thing. So somebody just saying a minute they like the rough stone. So again, I'll just come across this side so you can just get a sense of these differing styles. So the rough stone, definitely cheaper to build. But in many respects, I don't know if Catherine's on with this kind of sketchbook, she probably enjoyed drawing that more because of the textures. Camera frozen sound choppy and tinny. Refresh. I don't know. I mean, I'm getting 4 out of 5 signal. All I can see is at my end, and I'm not experiencing any problems at my end. So that does suggest that that's a refresh issue at yours. So it's locally available, Richard. Yes, absolutely, they were. This Jurassic limestone is all quarried within a kind of few miles away from here. So we're right at the sort of bottom of a valley, and they kind of quarried on the way down. So this is All Saints Church. And there is a church mentioned in the Domesday book, but there's nothing left of it, but it's certainly almost certainly on this site. There's a very kind of small amount of 12th century stonework in here, but the bulk of the church dates from the 13th century. An interesting kind of bit, if I can just kind of bring you around, is what they call blind arcading. And if anybody is... actually, I'll show you this building as we walk, because it's so pretty. You're always spoiled, aren't you? Janice is asking for a vertical shot. I don't use that word Adam shot simply because for a lot of people, they may not be aware who that is. I try and be inclusive in language. So if you just ask for a vertical shot, we can do that. So I'll just... Domesday. The Domesday book. So the Domesday book was a project undertaken in the Norman era following the Norman conquest. It was carried out and completed by 1086. And basically it was a survey of the wealth and the valuables. So I'll just spin that back around. Of England, so the new king could work out what he could tax, what he owned. So that was kind of what it was about. So there's what they call blind arcading on this church, which looks like there's windows missing, but it's actually just a form of decorative sort of stonework. I'll show you the crown pub in a minute. So this is quite common, but it's common in cathedrals, but not at all common in parish churches. So that's a bit of an oddity, but there's no cathedral here. So the kind of grandeur of All Saints perhaps, kind of gives light to that a little bit. So we're on kind of Red Lion Square, and this is the route of the coaches. So the Crown Hotel, one of the coaching inns, until the Stamford bypass opened in 1960. And the Crown is kind of typical of the hostelries that opened up to accommodate travellers on this route. And actually, much-needed road improvements came in the 1730s. Up until that point, they were largely, kind of mud tracks, which meant they were very, very slow for the vehicles. But what happened was in the 1730s, thank you, Kerry, responsibility moved from parishes to turnpike companies. So the turnpike companies, in effect, invested in road building, so infrastructure, if you like, and then charged fees. So they put down hard surfaces. So consequently, it meant that the coach could go a great deal faster, and so the journey times were sort of cut dramatically. So in effect, it ended up being 2 days to York, 2 days to London from here, in the kind of 1730s. So of course, it was about providing stabling and accommodation. Let's give you one last shot of Red Lion Square before we head down. But hopefully, you've been enjoying the tour thus far. I think it is a very special place. Even though my hands are rather cold, it has to be said. But my burger baby is working its way through, so that's good news. So let's turn down Crown Street. And it's named after the coaching inn, so say this is the Crown Hotel. And we're going to walk up towards kind of Broad Street at the moment, but it's quite appropriate because I was saying lots of filming is done here. And very recently they filmed something from The Crown, the TV show, which seems rather appropriate, and bizarrely, I don't quite know why they did this, but they turned a butcher shop, a wonderful butcher's place that makes Melton Mowbray pies, wonderful pork pies, and turned it into a Chinese restaurant. But anyway, so you look out for that. If you're watching season 5 of The Crown, if you see a Chinese restaurant, you will know. So I've been watching season 5 as well, but I've yet to see a Chinese restaurant. So when you do, you'll know. Did Jane Austen ever come here? She's not associated with it. This is obviously, the place that was chosen for the filming because it is so similar, if you like, to the world that she would have known and lived in. So this isn't about saying this is Jane Austen's haunt. Rather, this is very relevant, if you like, of the England that she was writing about, and particularly the society, because this is obviously very affluent. Lovely old cinema, just there right in the centre into Broad Street now, the marketplace of the town. So, just give you a little signage so you can get a sense of kind of where we are. It is wonderful, isn't it? Yeah. So we're come up Crown Street, got Red Line Street, so Red Line Square is in front of us. Broad Street. So Broad Street Marketplace was another set of almshouses of the hospital, sort of hoving into our view. And this is where an outdoor market is still held every Saturday. Well, that's the version, Kathy, the Keira Knightley version that was filmed largely here. And so we've got another almshouse. Thank you, Birgit. So about 90 stalls fill the marketplace every Friday. So it's still very, very vibrant. And along with the kind of coaching inns, it is very much a focal point for retail. So because you had all these people kind of coming through, people with money, with wealth, you got shops and service industries, market stalls and kind of shambles. People begin to trade from the ground floor of houses, selling everything from cutlery, ceramics, soaps, teas, coffees, chocolates, medicines, silks, rich damasks, wines, French brandies, you name it. So, kind of when Adam Smith talked about England as a nation of shopkeepers, he could have been talking about Stamford, because in essence what they were doing, they were taking advantage of the people that were passing through, killing a bit of time. So, but it wasn't just about kind of refuelling for service station, it was also the kind of commercial centre of the region. So I'll just bring it up here to show you this one. So this is another one of the almshouses. So this is the third one we're seeing now. This is the Hospital of William Brown, the merchant of 1410 to 1489. So again, being found a rich wool merchant. So it's the same story. It's wealthy Catholic merchants using their wealth to demonstrate their piety. It's a story that I keep telling over and over, not because I don't think you get it, but because it's so important. Patronage is the dynamic which drives the shaped society of medieval England. And obviously the wool staples, the people that are making money out of wool and textiles, were best placed to kind of drive this because they were inordinately wealthy and rich. Now by 1714, may we see a shot of the top of the roof of the building? Not easily from there because the way the stairs walk up. I'm afraid that's as good as it's going to get, just because you see the stairs go up there and then to the front, so I can't get any further back. Thank you, Madeline, that's most kind. You see here, it's the Hospital of William Brown, a merchant, was founded circa 1483. And 1483 was, of course, the year that Richard, Duke of Gloucester, became King of England, notoriously King Richard III. So, looking for a time period, that's when he's got another war memorial here. So I always like to feature these on the tours. Just as a kind of reminder that so many fell during the First War, no matter where you are, you're going to find a list of names, generally speaking, relating to the First War, but often as well underneath with names from the Second War and subsequent conflicts, Korea, Vietnam, Northern Ireland, Iraq, Afghanistan, etc. Lovely copies. So we've got a theatre opposite. So yeah, there were 6 major fairs here and 4 large cattle markets. And agriculture really kind of advancing kind of capitalist farmers investing in technology really kind of pushed up the productivity of farming. And then obviously they had a lot of enclosures around here, so creating what had been public space into private space. Then the drainage took place, so a lot of fenlands were kind of brought into use, so it became sort of hyper productive. And so you got more and more kind of product being produced for the market. And Stamford kind of benefits from the sale of kind of produce in the streets and the shops. And this is, I'm just going to cross us over here. And we're going to move from Broad Street into Ironmonger Lane. Yeah, Shelley, they do shut things down, obviously, to do the filming. That's kind of necessary. And they kind of lay carpets of like muck tracks. So if you took a street like this, they'd be coming and covering over the facades of the modern sort of shop fronts, but also what they would do is they'd literally lay a carpet down the middle, which would look like a mud track. So how far is Stamford from York? It's about 120 miles, Patty. It's roughly halfway between London and York. So that's what, if you like, they benefited from, was this ability to kind of be a good stopping place kind of halfway along the track. So in Ironmonger Street, which is a wonderful name. This, by the way, Nelson of Stamford, this is the Chinese restaurant that appeared in the Crown Series 5. Hi, Dawn. So, Ironmonger Street, named, not surprisingly, because of the sheer preponderance of ironmongers that were down here. I thought we'd had some UK troops over there in... I'll go away and check, but I think we had some forces there alongside the French in the 1950s. So Ironmonger Street was a kind of mixed residential and businesses, and again we've just got some charming units. And one or two, of course, here is showing some of the medieval older buildings. We've got signs of jettying. So jettying, of course, where the buildings kind of stick out. They get bigger from the top down. So there are some timber frame buildings here, as we can see, but for the most part they've been replaced, they've been removed. And instead we have mostly a town that is built of stone. But this would have been a street of small kind of workshops, of businesses, of artisans. That huge chimney, well, if they have a huge chimney, generally speaking, it means they were producing something that's pretty mucky, and they wanted to get, it up there and out there. I don't know what's produced here, but generally speaking, huge chimneys tend to mean you've got crap that you want to get out of the street level. So we could perhaps try and find out subsequently what that is, but... There's an unusually large number of ironmongers here, as you can kind of probably guess. But also, as I say, also cabinet makers, people working watches, clocks, leather, you name it, all this sort of consumer goods, really, that people would want. And, of course, it becomes then, in the surrounding villages, it's going to become their sort of commercial centre. So all the kind of wide-ranging services, from apothecaries, medical services, you name it, would have been available here at the time. So you've also got kind of gentlemen and wealthy sort of businessmen coming in to town for kind of entertainment as well. So you've got professional services, bankers, estate agents, lawyers and so forth. So it's that kind of place. This, by the way, I've never seen before. I've never seen, built into the fabric of a church, a row of retail. Isn't that interesting? I've never seen that. I don't know if anybody else has seen that. We certainly haven't got any in York. There are 5, by the way, medieval churches here. But I've never seen that sort of blending in. So behind us, the first officers, opposite on this side, the first officers, the newspaper, Mercury, started in 1695, became the Stamford Post in 1710, was still the major newspaper until very, very recently. Always Hago adventure. Hopefully, there's always a Hago adventure. And sorry, I'm just losing my voice. We can have a little communion commerce. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, this is absolutely. It is this blend of commerce and kind of Christianity. Always be selling, absolutely. And I mean, that's Jane Austen's England. Everything is based on faith. Kind of values. So this church, by the way, interestingly, St George's Church. The first benefactor here was a chap called William Bruges, so that's in Bruges in Belgium, and he held the first Garter of Arms. So you've heard of the Order of the Garter, a kind of list of people that kind of look after the interests of the monarch. He was the very first. The Garter principal is the person who declares the monarch. So it's David Wilde, I think he's called right now. When King Charles was actually officially declared monarch, it wasn't just when his mother died, but it was declared by the Order of the Garter. So the chap who was the first holder of that office is buried here. Thank you, Anne. And he was like the principal advisor to the sovereign in respect of kind of ceremony and heraldry, with particular responsibility obviously for England and Wales and Northern Ireland, but apart from Canada, also for the rest of the Commonwealth. So it's an important sort of job. And as I say, it's their job to proclaim the new monarch. So there we have the crest. And once the monarch's kind of made the sacred oath before the council, then the Garter King of Arms steps out onto the proclamation gallery, which overlooks Friary Court, to proclaim a new monarch. Who was that? So William Bruges, we're talking about there. So the very first head of the Garter. So money was flowing into the town by the beginning of the 19th century. And despite kind of repeated outbreaks of smallpox, the population begins to rise for the first time. And thank you, Leslie. And by 1801, the date of the first census, the population had doubled to around about 5,000. And the growth of kind of services and marketing reflected a general shift in the wealth towards the middle classes. Look at the lovely public library, if any librarians are on, but how cute is that? So the new houses and all the buildings obviously in stone, which is kind of quarried at Stamford. The quarries are at Ketton, Clipsham and Weldon, and also Collie Weston, so slate roofs. So if you have a look up at the roofs, you'll see that also Jurassic limestone roofs. Isn't it gorgeous? So it's so agreeable to look at. I'll give you another shot of the library. There might be a bit of signal drop just down here, so I apologise if there is. There's almost too much stone. And the impact of the development of this area was it was so desirable, they moved the sheep market up to the other end of the high street. I'll show you where that is in just a few minutes' time. So you get gentrification that sort of creates this environment shaped not just by wealth, but by values. That's what I was talking about a few minutes ago. So Anglican Christianity was the heart of this. And we're going to sort of walk towards, again, areas where the shooting of a lot of the Pride and Prejudice. So let's kind of just talk about Jane Austen and her world, the world she kind of inhabited. Because I think in Scandinavia, in sort of contemporary culture, we think her almost as a kind of a rom-com novelist now, don't we? The kind of Bridget Jones of her era. And that's certainly true. But equally, her works have got this kind of solid moral and spiritual foundation that make them as much about vice and virtue, kind of character and conscience, I'd say. So about marriage and manners, your marriage is the ultimate prize, isn't it? Sorry, I couldn't go past that wagon then. The turning points in novels, they often hinge on characters' examinations of conscience, putting morality kind of front and centre. We're going to get lost somewhere today, John? I don't think so. It's not the easiest place to get lost in. We might lose signal a little bit, because one or two of these places down here, it's not 100% great, but hopefully we'll be able to bring you enough of it to give you kind of sense. So God, church and religion were kind of integral parts of Jane Austen's life, and of course the society that she lived in. And it really influences her work. So novels are kind of rife with moral commentary on everything from kind of hypocrisy, if you think Mr. Collins in Pride and Prejudice, to kind of near occasions of sin, the play they do in Mansfield Park. But so often returning to love and marriage, must be the Sub Vikings. If you think about Pride and Prejudice, the marriage between the wayward Lydia and the deceitful Wickham, Austen offers how little permanent happiness could belong to a couple who were only brought together because their passions were stronger than their virtues. I mean, what a line that is, And that's what Lizzie says. Lizzie could easily conjecture. And you kind of don't need to look any much further, than the titles. Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, to see that the kind of characters' flaws and virtues are important to the stories as the kind of characters themselves. So the signal's a little bit shaky around here, so just do bear with me. We'll kind of come through to the other side. So Austen's sort of heroes and heroines kind of shine bright either in devotion or a kind of reformed adoption of the cardinal virtues. Cardinal virtues being prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance, forbearance, all these kind of characteristics. What I both acute psychological insights. Thank you, Richard. It's kind of interesting. And I think, she is somebody that is startlingly modern, whilst, of course, she is, a figure from the past. It's very, very easy to kind of read Jane Austen. I mean, she's a very, very readable. If you haven't read it, if you think the sort of thought of classics is a bit scary, I mean, these days, not yourself, go for an audiobook. But you'll find they are very, very easy to read. Lots of short chapters, lots happening, they get on with it. Middlemarch, by comparison, this was also filmed here, a bit harder going, George Eliot, but Jane Austen, dead easy. You could read it in schools quite easily. So, it's all about, isn't it, in these characters, got peace, patience, kindness, goodness, generosity, gentleness, faithfulness, modesty, self-control, chastity. I agree, Tish, it's sort of, you're to pat yourself on the back. If you've done Middlemarch, and it's not, the story's good, marriage is kind of at the centre of it. She marries a sort of dull priest, doesn't she? So it's kind of weird on that. I can't remember the name of the character in Middlemarch, but did you read them all, Diane? Fantastic. But she sort of has an option, doesn't she? She can marry the heartthrob or this rather bookish older cleric, and she marries him, but then he's dead boring and just says he's noted his books the entire time, and then she ends up having a fling anyway. So I'm not quite sure what the moral of Middlemarch was in that respect. But anyway, so you've kind of got characters which, Dorothea, that's it, yeah, kind of exemplify. What's it called? Chasode or so. I used to read voraciously and now I don't. It's terrible. So you must forgive me, but my memory on these things isn't as good as it ought to be. But there you go. That's why I have you lot here. That's why I invite 200 of my closest friends to come along on a tour. Aren't they just, Kathy? Aren't they just? Yeah, that's right, Cusserban or something. Yeah, he was an older cleric, as I recall. So that's what we've done here. The signal isn't brilliant, but let's kind of push on. So, yeah, these kind of characters sort of exemplify, don't they, these qualities. And you kind of got, gentle ones like kind of Jane Bennet in Pride and Prejudice. You got patient Eleanor Dashwood in Sense and Sensibility, great book. You got the modest Fanny Price in Mansfield Park, another wonderful book. And they're kind of rewarded with homes and husbands, aren't they? But those that kind of don't, the narrow-minded Mr. Collins, the pruding Sir Walter Elliot, are playfully kind of skewered. And those kind of needing some polish, the proud Darcy, the emotionally intemperate Marianne, snobbish Emma, are kind of metaphorically, I think, thrust into the belly of a whale for a kind of sober examination of conscience before being sort of spat out. And so it's a lot of fun, basically, is Jane Austen. You can... but also at the same time, this very, very strong sort of sense, isn't there, that, the kind of the final task, if you like, of the characters is this transformation, the repentant sinner, confession and reconciliation. These are the kind of motifs, I think. I love a different take, Lost in Austen. Yeah, fantastic. And highly recommended that Lost in Austen. The problem, of course, in Jane Austen's world, as we all know, is age, right? Because, Marianne Dashwood expresses the views of popular literature at the time, which is that a 27-year-old woman is too old for love. 27. In Pride and Prejudice, Charlotte Lucas is desperate at age 27, and so she accepts Mr. Collins. But in Persuasion, Austen overturns the conventions by showing us a mature 27-year-old woman who does find love through her society, even though society was over the hill. But actually, they do make a thing, don't they? There's the lovely bit right at the beginning of Pride and Prejudice where Mr. Bennet doesn't really want his wife to go and see Bingley with his 5 daughters, because he thinks of the 5 daughters, actually his wife is the most attractive. So they kind of have a cheeky idea there. So where have we got to? So isn't it, just look at this though, isn't it something? So there's a lot of, in the film, by the way, the soldiers march to the centre of the city. That was done just right here. So the kind of marriage plots is absolutely kind of central to the kind of Jane Austen world, isn't it? So, Mr. Knightley, I think, is he 37, 38? He's presented as, being old. Austen offers other themes as well. But, if you think a lot of the age of character in Jane Austen, kind of 16 to 22, they're what we would now call kind of young people. But they have these older people around them, often kind of benign people, like Mr. Bennet and so forth, that can pass on a kind of wisdom. Now, of course, beauty was sort of crucially important as well to the young women of Austen's time, because it enabled them to find the husbands. That's absolutely true, Janice. Lifespans were shorter. That's a really kind of good spot. Money, of course, absolutely. It's about having the resources, isn't it? So two of Austen's heroines, Marianne Dashwood and Anne Elliot, are said to have lost their bloom. And Austen defines that as the kind of healthy, glowing, skin-free blemishes and wrinkles. The health was kind of fragile in these days. You had an awful lot of, the ladies, wouldn't they? The kind of the Elizabeth Barrett Browns, the kind of taking to the laudanum couch. This, by the way, the Stamford Art Centre. Beautiful Georgian building. This was used for Middlemarch. So Middlemarch, this was centred here, the TV show. Lots of women died in childbirth. Good call, good spot, Susan. Yep. So, they would have been younger, I suppose. They had kind of lot to kind of go through. So a woman's bloom, as it would be called, could be lost through sickening and suffering. And as I say, the kind of cures they had in those days, they were obsessed with laudanum, with the kind of private medics. A draft of laudanum, which is basically narcotics and alcohol mixed together. No wonder they took to the sofa afterwards. So that kind of pale and wan, that idea of the kind of the permanently sickly women, they were basically stoned and pissed the entire time, I think is the kind of way of describing it. But look at this. Isn't this just... I want to magic the cars away from you. Because, I can't get off the sofa because I'm absolutely off my head. That's kind of really what was kind of going on. But as long as a doctor gives... It's like Elvis, isn't it? As long as it's got a doctor's medical note attached to it, right? It's medicine, right? Absolutely case into corsets, all these kind of, the silly fashions almost kind of the time. So I just wanted to dwell here because it is just beautiful, isn't it? Prim and proper is no fun. Ronnie Lynn knows it. So obviously a loss of the bloom, as you might say for a woman, could really impact on her chance of getting a marriage. And in places like this, Stamford, sort of society places where, you would be hoping your daughters could encounter and meet, sons of the gentry, perhaps even the nobility, maybe army officers, that we sort of billeted here. So to lose one's bloom, to get to an age where basically you're sort of past it, was pretty disastrous in this society. And it suggests that there's a conduct book, sort of book around Jane Austen's time, sort of says that etiquette, which suggests that at age 30, a woman lays aside youthfulness and arrays herself in the majesty of sobriety or in the grandeur of simple magnificence. By the time she's 50, she should gracefully throw aside ornamentation and descend into old age. So that's what they thought in Jane Austen's era. So again, the odd timber frame building, but they sort of stick out like sore thumbs, don't they? Here. They have had to fight for their rights. And women's rights, women were chattels at this period of time. Make no bones about it. And don't forget, it's highly unusual that Jane Austen published under her own name. George Eliot, by comparison, published under the name of a man. On marriage, you were in fact given, weren't you? You become part of the marriage kind of contract. Women did not have separate property rights. So whatever wealth they may have had going into the marriage, that instantly becomes part of the husband's wealth, unless there are very, very narrow specific circumstances that would stop that. Yes, Erin, most of the buildings are Georgian and early Victorian. Thank you, Dorothy. So Elizabeth Elliot is approaching a dangerous age of 30. We've got Mrs. Weston of Emma, appears to be in her kind of late 30s, though Frank Churchill describes her as being a pretty young woman. So there are several kind of role models, older women, like Mrs. Weston, whose sense of self-worth is not dependent on her appearance, or the male kind of reaction to it. Mrs. Croft and Lady Russell are likewise secure in their age and appearance. Look at the church bells, isn't that lovely? St Mary's are passing by now, so St Mary's Hill. And funny if it's actually a man, Sir Walter Elliot, aged 54, who is the most concerned about his age and the most vain about his looks. Should we the belter? Who's heaving bosoms? Let men wear them, yeah, absolutely. Let them wear, let them wear corsets, absolutely. So for Austen, I think youth's are not enough. You know, Mrs. Bennet, for instance, has youth and beauty, enough to capture a husband, but not the kind of depth of character needed for ageing well. And Austen uses phrases like the evening of life. In Emma, she says the November of life. And what she's talking about is a kind of awareness of kind of passing time and the acknowledgement that to live a satisfying lifespan, the charm and freshness of youth needs to be supplemented by something deeper. And you'd hope to find that in marriage, in a soulmate. Because, of course, the alternative to marriage, dare we even contemplate this? A single life involved being, I hate to use the word, a despised old maid. There was not a lot of room in society for the old maid. Destitute spinster, absolutely. You know, you're better off taking yourself into an almshouse, go indivisible. You know, that was really what was on offer. You join a nunnery, if you like, but just get out of public sight because you're not welcome. You know, and of course, before we get sort of too judgy about Jane Austen's time, go back a century or two before, and these are the people that called out as witches. Once women are no longer kind of fertile, able to produce babies, they become, we have always like wizened, don't we? Do you know what I mean? And dried up, right? You know, let's be honest, we know exactly what we're talking about in terms of these sort of insults, and they are often the women that are decried, picked upon, and or become a missionary, absolutely. Yeah, that sort of thing, to go and have a vocation, but become invisible, go elsewhere. You're not at one, you have no role or function in the society because you failed. Marriage is, if anything Jane Austen tells you, it's the root, you know, of all happiness for women is marriage. That is, and even late marriages can kind of rescue women from this kind of fate of being perpetually on the shelf, as you might say. And Austen herself had some friends who were older, impoverished single women. So it may be this kind of influence her writing. In Emma discusses old maids, and Harriet is shocked that Emma does not plan to marry because, in Emma's words, an old maid is at last so dreadful. Emma disagrees and says a single woman of good fortune is always respectable and maybe as sensible and pleasant as anybody else. But she adds, a single woman with a very narrow income must be a ridiculous, disagreeable old maid, the proper sport of boys and girls. So, you know, absolutely, I'm saying I'm riling you all up, I'm really winding up. But I mean, this is it. You know, it's still easy to focus on the rom-com, isn't it? Lovely elements of Jane Austen, but actually, in terms of her views of the sisterhood, she's not really on point. Anne Bronte, Tenant Wildfell Hall, in my money, is a lot better. She didn't really get to push forward the cause of the girls. But I did say that we're always looking out for cute spots for Marlena to add to her property portfolio. It's burgeoning now. And I did wonder, Marlena, whether one of these down here, just on the side of Town Meadows, might fit the bill. Yeah, I thought so. I'm getting maybe this one with the timbering, or over here, very, very cute, known as the cottage. So how dinky is that? Have a spinster's Hager? Absolutely. You know, I think we've got past this now. You know, I think we see women of value at all ages, but they didn't in those days. So isn't that cute? Cute as well. We've probably talked a lot, haven't we, about Jane Austen, but I love Jane Austen. And I really strongly, if you haven't read Jane Austen, I know there's some people on here really into her. What would you say? Would you start Pride and Prejudice? Mansfield Park's a great novel. Maybe start Pride and Prejudice. You know, you're not going to go too far wrong, but you'll be amazed at how much fun it is. There's so many little passageways, by the way, down here. A lot of divorced Simpsons. Only haven't read Northanger Abbey. Oh, okay. Pride and Prejudice, Emma. Yeah, Emma, of course, They did what's that remake? Very, very, very funny film that I thought I was going to hate and I absolutely loved. Alicia Silverstone. What's it called? Clueless, that's it. If you've not seen Clueless, which probably isn't my kind of film whatsoever, if you sort of said what a sort of film that I would like, I'd run a million miles away from Clueless. But I'd have been wrong. It is charming, funny, sprightly, and basically it's Emma set in I don't know where, somewhere in California, I guess, modernised. You know, the forever sort of well-meaning, interfering, very popular, slightly ditzy, wonderful central character played by Alicia Silverstone is basically an updating of Emma. Absolutely brilliant. So if you want an easy way into Jane Austen, right, watch Clueless and then go and get a copy of Emma and start there, or Pride and Prejudice, any of them really, they're all great. Now this, by the way, I mentioned about moving the sheep market, and this is where it's moved to. So this area here became the sheep market when, frankly, they didn't really want the ruffians sort of cluttering up the smart areas. But yeah, definitely should say it's charming. And this, by the way, this modern sculpture is something from 2008, and it replaces the old Stamford cross, which just means we don't really know what happened to the Stamford cross. And the Stamford cross was one of 12 across England when the body of Eleanor, wife of Henry I, was carried down to Westminster. Wherever she passed through, they built a cross. And so this is in place of that. It's lovely flower motif. It's quite modern, but again, this lovely local stone. The Eleanor crosses, absolutely legendary about the Eleanor crosses. So let's walk down. This is now the Castle Dyke area. So there was a castle here that was originally kind of set up by William the Conqueror, going back again to where was the cross? Why was it replaced? Because it just fell down, disappeared, not quite sure, but there's no real record of what happened to it. But it was gone, so they put that in place to replace it. So this castle area we're kind of coming into now, first of all, kind of grew up in the Norman era. So again, William the Conqueror, in terms of... can you turn back for the last shot? I'll try. We're a little bit behind on time, so... Did we live on set? Yeah, of course. Yeah. So when I say the film set, the film was set here entirely. It was filmed here. They were as they were kind of working at the closed. It's a working, living place, absolutely. But it just so happens that it's used extensively for filming period drama because it is so complete the integrity of the streets. There are so few modern buildings in here that this is why it is in effect a living period drama film set. Fantastic moment. So this is all that's left of the medieval castle, and again it's been converted into a war memorial, so a lovely bench there dedicated to the Royal Flying Corps and the RAF, and over here to the First War. Thank you, Debbie. So this is all that's left of the castle. Some people would give tons of money to vacate their homes. Yeah, absolutely, Elena. It can be very lucrative if you've got one of the absolute kind of showpiece properties and they want to film the interiors. What's quite interesting, actually, is name the film shot here. Yeah, absolutely. So Pride and Prejudice, 2005, Middlemarch TV show, Da Vinci Code, did quite a lot of filming here. Middlemarch, as I say, basically lots and lots of kind of period dramas because it's just very, very easy to kind of film here. So you see here the site of William the Conqueror's castle, erected in 1068, ruined by the 1340s, demolished by the mid-16th century, and this is the only bit that's left. But what we do have, and of course it was built right by the River Welland, is a beautiful now what they call town meadows. And if you saw the picture that I put up as the kind of tour photograph, we'll try and recreate that photo for you now, albeit of course the light isn't anything like as good as it was. So Town Meadows, in effect, would have been part of the Mott and Bailey kind of setup for the castle. So, of course, you always have a central keep and a kind of much larger sort of section then that kind of emanates outwards. But this is the famous town bridge. So let's have a walk down here. And had Midsummer filmed in the town? I don't know. Is the answer to that one? Down. I mean, there is so many. If you go on kind of filming Lincolnshire, you do kind of see, because lots of places are very, very historic around here. And largely, as I say, it's because the railways didn't come through. Well, I mean, this is very similar to the Cotswolds, isn't it, in terms of its kind of location, its overall look and feel. But because the railway didn't come through here, in effect, everything to the bypass. So Peterborough became a modern industrial kind of metropolis, benefiting from kind of very good kind of railway links and so forth, whereas Stamford stayed small and sort of contained. So consequently, it's that lack of industrialisation, exactly the same as York, that means you've got so many more. How many? Sorry for asking, I guess this is more about the movies and the books. Non-just movie. Well, we've talked about both. I think you can sort of go through the chat. We've talked about which books we would recommend, as well as kind of movies. So hopefully, for the whiz back, there's plenty in there. But you can't go wrong with any of them, really. I can recommend. So this is the famous town bridge, or Stamford Bridge. Of course, there's a Stamford Bridge in London. This is, again, one of the main thoroughfares. We're going to go see the George pub in a minute on the other side of the river. Isn't it just gorgeous? I mean, you know, are you in love with this town or what? It is an absolute delight, isn't it? It is a special, special, special place. That could be Bruges, couldn't it? You know, with Stefan or Mark takes there, doesn't he? Mine is smitten. It's just frozen in time. And so peaceful. Let's just go on to this landing here so we can just get a proper beautiful shot. So this is the tour description photograph, by and large, but in much better sky on the day that was taken. How's that? The River Welland. Yeah, you could definitely sit here with your sandwiches, Sandy, on a picnic and while away time. So it's quite French as well. And Elena, French speaker. No, I don't know if Alex is on, from France, but it's got quite a French kind of feel to it as well, I think, the town bridge. We've got some more almshouses over here, so let's go and have a look at those. We'll go to the George Inn and then work our way down towards Burley House. And we'll see if the estate's open. If it is, I'll take us on and we'll go see the house. If not, next time I come, we'll do less of the town and we'll go all the way up to Burley House, which is one of the finest Elizabethan manors kind of anywhere in England. So State House is absolutely amazing. If you've not seen it, I did a short little clip on Facebook earlier today when I was there, signal testing, and so have a look if you've not seen it. It is absolutely kind of magnificent. So as I say, this area here would have all been part of the castle. It's all been kind of cleared out, so there's only that kind of tiny section left. So again, it was an important sort of stronghold. And going all the way back to the Vikings, the original name, Stamford, was Stoneford. So it was a place you could cross the river and a source of stone. Why so many almshouses? That's a good question, Joan. We did talk about that a little bit earlier, but I'll kind of refresh on that. Almshouses were a fantastic method of pious philanthropy. So if you had money, if you're a successful merchant, you've done well in trade and so forth, thank you, John and Karen, then you had money to spend, and charity is a very, very important principle, particularly under the Catholic faith, so prior to the Reformation, more so than to the Anglican faith, but obviously it's still important. But particularly the Catholic faith, giving money was incredibly valuable. And so what you could do is you set up almshouses who would then, obviously you'd help the poor, okay? But of course you would then expect them to pray for your soul. So in effect you're kind of renting prayers. Yeah, we've sort of lost it, Janice, haven't we? The kind of sense of responsibility, my brother's keeper. Yes, it'd be good fun to come dawn in the summer. So crossing again. How many people live here, John? Oh, it's not huge, I couldn't say, it's, I think, 25,000 or so. It's not a kind of major centre, it's pretty small. Yeah, government stepped in. But everything on government's about rationing, isn't it? It's kind of really rather difficult, isn't it? So I'm not saying, because there was no safety net for people, in essence, this was not just filling a gap, it was filling a void. But nonetheless, because this was then obviously an exhibition of their piety, they tended to go to pretty kind of big lengths to demonstrate they were very, very serious in these kind of endeavours. So we're going to pass another one of the almshouse in a minute. We'll just see it on our left-hand side. But this is the beginnings, by the way, of the George. Is tourism still a major source of commerce? Yes, it is. But it's a wealthy professional town, so they're not totally reliant on tourism. So this is accommodation for the George Inn. It's a fantastic place to come and stay. It was the most important of the coaching inns of Stamford. There was about 6 major coaching inns. The George, the most important of all of them. This was like a tip-top, the creme de la creme of place to stay. Are people praying to Elvis now? I don't know if that's the case. If they are, I wonder what kind of outcomes they get as a result of that. But, there was a sign for Elvis, was there? Is it Elvis movie? Is it sort of showing a big screen nowadays? I saw that a little bit earlier on. So, isn't it lovely though, the George? So we'll talk about that in just a minute. But I'll show you these almshouses. Then we'll pop inside the George because they've very kindly said I could pop in and show you the interior, just to give you a kind of sense of life on the road. So for so many people, they're going from one place to another, as you might say, halfway between York and London. And we know that York was the second city of the country. It's a place, the Council of the North. So oftentimes you've got the great and the good, and the only way they can travel is via stagecoach. So how pretty is this? Again, we're talking almshouses. Look at that blossom. But again, look at the quality of the build. So this is Lord Burghley's. We're going to talk about Lord Burghley, Cecil, in just a minute. But isn't that, look at that. Bit of top frame with a blossom there. Isn't it just make you melt? How gorgeous is that? Yeah, I know, cherry blossoms. So lovely. So I'll get you the board on this one. So again, almshouse this time by Lord Burghley, the kind of Cecil family. Putting down accommodation for widows, for the poor, to somebody said about defibrillators earlier in the boxes. No, most of them are still owned as almshouses. So this is Lord Burghley's Hospital. So hospital, it's a place of hospitality. Originally, it was part of medieval hospitals in the 1170s, so Crusader times. Somebody asked there, so Lord Burghley's Hospital, now a charity, run accommodation, maintained by trustees, and home to women who've lived and worked in Stamford for a number of years. So there is your answer. So that is Lord Burghley's Hospital on the edge of Town Meadows and by the River Welland. But let's go and have a look at the George. So the George, as I say, there's been an inn on this site, we think, for something approximating 1,000 years, which is just quite bizarre, isn't it, when you think that's something we can go after so far? Okay. So we do need to get on. I'm a bit behind, so last shot. So see, we'll just have a quick look on the bridge the other way, so you can just get a sense of. So this is Town Bridge. We looked at it from the side. I'll give you now a view. So this is All Saints Church, very near where we kind of started off. We're going to went we've got sort of circular. That was the church at the bottom. So your view coming into the town, and again the view of the River Welland. Let's see if we can see. There's some swans here earlier. Oh, there, Alec. So we've got swans. I've come out to see you on Haygate. So I say this is the view from Stamford Bridge. This is the Stamford Bridge, the bridge coming into Stamford, or Lord Burghley's Bridge, with the Burghley Almshouse behind us. And as I say, the George is the pub in front of us. And what we know is that there's been an inn on this site basically as long as there's been a kind of town here. It really is quite crazy, kind of how long it's been established. So I just need to get a drink. And then I'm getting a little bit dry. I do apologise. Even the swans, absolutely. So being as how you had this stop that was halfway between York and London, and by the early part of the 19th century, it was less than a day's journey to London. But throughout the period, of course, of the stagecoaches, there was the peril of the highwaymen. So this sign for the George was deliberately put up. What do you think that was designed to look like? To send a message to the highwaymen. Absolutely frowns on it. There's a gallows. So this was a message to Tom King, to Dick Turpin and their ilk, that there might be 40 coaches passing here every day, but it was hands off. It wasn't for them. So what's lovely is, as we go inside the George, is that when you went in, the first thing you saw was a room for London, or for York, depending on the journey, the direction you were going in, and we've still got them. So just coming into down there, so you can see here we have the London room, the York bar. Isn't that wonderful? It's a delightful. The signal's not brilliant here, so I'm not too long. But perhaps the most kind of famous patron here is a gentleman whose portrait is here. In there, so the signal just dropped completely there, but are you back up now? So hopefully, so Daniel Lambert, actually in the first 20 years of his life, Daniel Lambert was an athlete who ate very well, lived very well, but he then began to put on kind of weights and becomes morbidly obese. And he actually ends up sort of, he becomes like a sort of fairground thing, sort of self-employed, and he died en route. So this is one of the last places that he said. But look at he was 52 stone when he died, absolutely. Daniel Lambert, yeah. But look at his walking stick. Look how thick that is. It's amazing, isn't it? This guy. And he was a man of real kind of gentle manners. He was kind of much beloved by everybody that met him and spoke to him. It wasn't his diet. He lived, he absolutely fasted, tried to lose weight. But it was very, very problematic. So I'm going to come out because the signal's not brilliant. But a wonderful place to come and stay, the George. If you're in this part of the world, do come and consider staying at an inn, been there for 1,000 years and closely associated with Lord Burleigh. So it's time to talk about Lord Burleigh. And Lord Burleigh, I know you couldn't help but notice, isn't it lovely? So we're going to walk down towards Burleigh House now. And I know, I wasn't expecting to see Darth Vader on this tour, but it just goes to show, when it comes to Hago, you never know what is going to happen, do you? So there we go. So the George Hotel, been on that side, and Lord Burleigh did an awful lot to extend that inn. And his name, he was born as William Cecil. And if anybody's heard of him, his son is probably even more famous than him, Robert Cecil. We'll talk about him in just a few minutes, but I'm just digging through my notes to get to it, because I have to jump backwards and forwards. I'll just give you another shot where I can just find out my notes on Mr. Cecil, Her Majesty the right-hand man. Cecil. Is that right? Okay. Apologies. Spine Master, I'm sorry, Spine Master. Yeah, he's up with the Spine Network. That's the very, very same Cecil, but I've got some notes from somewhere, but I've got them all mixed up, horribly mixed up, and now I can't find them. But it's from St Martin's, the High Street, walking down towards Burleigh Park, the ancestral home. That was Walsingham. Well, he was the Lord High Treasurer. He held a series of roles. I'll find my notes in a minute. But his son, Robert Cecil, becomes the guy who really does kind of ramp up the Secret Service. Father of Edward de Vere, yeah, same guy. Well, I think if I'm right in remembering, Edward de Vere was one of the court of. They call it the Court of Masters or something, and basically there were people whose fathers had died very young, and so he looked after them. He sort of gave them guidance and educated them. But I'm just trying to remember. Edward de Vere, Earl of Oxford, right? Some believe that's really interesting. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, with Shakespeare that it's funny, isn't it, because obviously in art, a lot of the great masters would come in, wouldn't they, just paint a few faces, and they'd have students that would come in and fill in all the backgrounds, do the kind of scenery. But with sort of works of literature, we tend to expect, to be the pen of one person, don't we? So, it's not at all, because John Fletcher was a collaborator, wasn't he, with Shakespeare. I think he collaborated on Henry VIII and one or two others. But we sort of tend to think of it as being penned by one person, rather than kind of being a sort of group effort, as you might say. So, isn't it lovely? Just walking out now, say, towards kind of Burghley House. We're on our kind of way out of the main town, and Burghley House is probably to the gates, probably about half a mile outside. Then about another sort of mile, I would say, through the parkland, sort of up to the top. If we can get in, I'll take you up there. I think I need to give up reading any more Austen books. One was fine, second, insanely bored, but liked all the movies. Okay, well, it's horse for courses, right, Laurie? I mean, some of us will like things, others sort of less so. But I would certainly suggest that everybody reads at least one, because, in terms of classic literature, which most definitely Austen sort of fits into, it is very, very readable. The books aren't especially long. They're kind of dead easy to kind of read, and the characters often bright, funny, and some of them rather likeable. So now here we are, look. So Daniel Lambert of Leicester. So he wasn't from here, but he died here, aged 39. Around 39 years. So shortly before he died, 52 stone and 11 pounds. So a big lad. But as I say, for the first 20 years, he was an athlete. He was a swimmer, a fencer, a runner, and bizarrely, so it must have been metabolic. That's the word, isn't it? He just starts to pile on insane levels of weight. Absolutely like King Henry VIII. Yeah, it's a really good sort of comparator. Yeah. Again, let me just give you a bit of a pound. What is a stone in pounds? Well, there's 14 pounds in a stone. So those are good at maths. It's 600 pounds. Is that right? Probably thyroid. I think you're probably right, Dawn. It's definitely something, isn't it? Along those lines. But it's Margaret's on it. 728. That is. I don't seem to think about weight in pounds. That's a North American thing, but I think you'll agree that is pretty much. Oh no, Stephen! By the end, he couldn't really move. He was largely immobile. But he was moving around because he would basically be. People would pay to come and see him. I mean, that's obviously part of our kind of society in those days. Is that in effect, freak shows provided employment. Let's be honest, for people that could earn a living that way. And it's not what he was. He was being in transit from one kind of employment to the next. When he passed through Stamford, staying here, took ill and died sort of very suddenly. So Fast Food wasn't around then. No, it wasn't Dye Street, we think. It was just sort of kind of bizarre, to get that kind of weight gain. But, obviously, it's recent enough for us to have a very high degree of confidence, in the kind of measurements. And when they've looked at his skeleton, and they know that his bones are in kind of proportion, so it isn't sort of a kind of gigantism or something like that. It's just strange. It's obviously, as I say, some metabolic, some thyroid issue, whatever it might do, but a hyper weight gain. Weird one, right? But there you go, Daniel Lambert. So he is something of a kind of celebrity around these parts. It is. Cookbooks from this time are strange. Well, often cookbooks, I mean, they kind of start as estate books, don't they? Because they're sort of teaching, particularly wives, often young wives, how to look after households. It's very, very common for young girls in medieval time to marry older men, not as love matches, but to learn how to run a household. And then when they died, usually without children, the family would benefit to a degree. They'd be given a dowry, and then with their dowry they could make then a good second marriage. So often, like the Good Man of Paris, very famous medieval text, a cookbook, and household economics, he's in his 70s, she's about 13 or 14, and she's being taught. So William Cecil, we're outside the William Cecil pub now, and so William Cecil is... You're reading wonderful books, sir. I'm guessing we're talking about Jane Austen there, so... So William Cecil, the first Baron of Burghley, or Lord Burghley, was Elizabeth I's kind of Lord High Treasurer and Secretary of State. And so he was the dominant landholder in this area. And as we said, we've seen kind of lots of Burghley houses, Burghley Lane, Burghley Hospital, and so forth. He was born in 1520 during the reign of King Henry VIII. And he was to become a kind of English statesman and chief advisor to Henry's daughter, Queen Elizabeth I, for most of her reign. He was twice Secretary of State and Lord High Treasurer. And in the Encyclopaedia Britannica, it says that from 1558 for 40 years, the biography of Cecil is almost indistinguishable from that of Elizabeth and the history of England. So Cecil set as a kind of main goal the English policy of the creation of a united Protestant British Isles. So that was his focus. His methods included the complete control of Ireland and to forge an alliance with Scotland, because protection from invasion required a powerful Royal Navy. And whilst he wasn't going to fully successful, his sort of successors stuck with these goals, and it became, in effect, British foreign policy pretty much up to the sort of First World War. In 1587, Cecil persuaded the Queen to order the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, as she's implicated in a plot to assassinate her. And of course, he's famously the father of Robert Cecil, the first Earl of Salisbury, and the founder of the Cecil dynasty, the Marquesses of Exeter and Salisbury, which produced many politicians, including two sort of prime ministers. So there really is a big kind of dynasty. And as I say, he owned the George Inn all the way back, because of course, as the local landowner, he basically owned everything. You know, that's how these things work, going back to the kind of manorial system established, you know, after the Norman conquest, is a landholder would own everything. You'd have tenant farmers that would come in. The only exception really is the church. And the Abbey of Peterborough owned a great deal of lands in this area. So they had two holy houses on the site where now the George Hotel stands. So this is the gatehouse of Burghley Park. And by the way, the reason that the holy house were there was because this was also on the route for the pilgrims. On your way to Jerusalem, heading down to London, to Kent. Okay, so the Hospital of St John and St Thomas was there, and it was destroyed during the War of the Roses. So actually, it looks like the gate's open. So we'll see how far we can get in before we get kicked out, and we'll talk a little bit about Cecil on the way. If I can get you all the way up there, I will, but I don't want to get locked in. That's the only problem, because I know it closes at dusk, so I may be kind of risking it a bit. But isn't it amazing? That's your gatehouse. Is Burghley House? Yes, Burghley horse trials absolutely take place here. That is 100% the same place. So this is your entrance, basically. The way in. That is a gatehouse, isn't it? This is money. This is money, and then some more money. Yeah, this is it. I'm just a bit worried that we might get kind of locked in. But Marley wants to live here, because the big house is about 10-15 minutes walk from here. So I know the city's going to close at dusk, and it's starting to feel distinctly duskish. So I am a little bit nervous about coming in here. So I think that we're going to save this for another tour. I think we're going to come back and we're going to do Burghley House. Yeah, absolutely. I think we'll come and do, because this parkland, to do it justice, it's by Capability Brown. I'm sure many of you will know about Capability Brown. He was, the landscaper to the wealthy elite. And I mean, this is fantastic. So Capability Brown, it sort of stems from this kind of this 18th century idea of wealth that, if you don't like the world around you, change it. Yeah, it's about a 15-minute walk from here, so I'm just worried we're not going to get there and get back, and if this gate gets locked, then I've got to tramp around and try and find somebody in the dark, and I've still got a good 2.5 hours drive home, so I'm going to have to kind of draw a line there. But so Capability Brown is that sort of that worldview of this age of reason kind of thinking, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Where it's no longer about the world that God created. It's if that world isn't good enough, recreate it till you like it. If there isn't a waterway there, create one. If there isn't a bridge there, build one. If there isn't a forest there, plant one. If there isn't a valley there, create one. It's this whole different mindset, isn't it? You compare that to kind of the pious kind of medieval world that would have seen that as a real effrontery. They'd have seen this as kind of glorification of the individual rather than glorification of God. They'd say these are temples to wealth and finance, to kind of self-importance. But in this kind of post-Reformation thinking, the great era of the landed estates, then the thinking I'm talking about becomes incredibly common. And it is just about how grand can you get. And when it comes to Burley House, the answer is very, very grand indeed. So thank you, everybody. I'll see you very, very soon. Bye-bye.